On behalf of the Bloomington-Normal NAACP branch and Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, we welcome you today. Their local branch is the Nu Psi Lambda chapter. So the constituents have prepared many questions for you. Why don't we get right into it?
Right.
I want to make sure I properly identify you. William Bessler?
Yes.
Running for McLean County Board District number 4, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Why don't we get into it and just
Yeah.
capitalize on the moment? What inspired you to run for this office?
Well, my inspiration for running for office is the same as my inspiration to do public service. My mom ran for my hometown school board when I was a kid, so I saw her dedication to service and how important community was to her. And while her campaign was ultimately unsuccessful, she continued to serve through the PTO organization and many other community groups in my hometown, and that's really always been my inspiration. So when I started to pick out a career, I wanted to go into community development. I always thought about my mom, picking that career, and even to today, when I make decisions, whether it be on the county board or in my job with community development, I think about my mom and what would be beneficial to her and other working families, and that's really what carried me into public service.
Well, thank you for that. Now, what specific experiences do you have to prepare you for this role?
Yeah, so I've been in the community development field for about 10 years. So I started as a housing counselor in a nonprofit in the south side of Peoria. So I help folks build credit, I'd help folks buy their first home, and unfortunately, when folks were facing foreclosure, I'd help them through that process. I also did community relations with that nonprofit, so I was out and active in the community as well. I then began working for the state of Illinois as a human services caseworker with the Department of Human Services, so I'd help folks get SNAP benefits and Medicaid and other benefits that are available to them. And then I started working in local government, like I said, in community development, so doing things from housing rehabilitation to public infrastructure. I've also been active politically as well. So I was the elections chair for the McLean County Democratic Party when we took over Democratic control of the McLean County Board in 2024. And I've been active in campaigns since Barack Obama's re-election campaign in 2012.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, what do you see as the top 3 issues facing our community currently?
Well, when I've talked to voters, when I was gathering petition signatures or just out in the community, the number one thing that kept coming up was housing. So I think housing is the number one issue. Unfortunately, too many folks can't afford housing, and they're having a hard time buying their first home or just finding a rental unit to get them through whatever stage of life they're in. So I support creating a public-private partnership for an affordable housing trust. So that would be a partnership between the municipalities, Bloomington-Normal, and the county, and other private companies to provide funding for that, so we can actually have funding, local funding that's available for the development of affordable housing. I also think the state and federal government needs to step up their housing policy. I think we need to have an expansion of the low-income housing tax credit program, and we also need a version of the low-income housing tax credit program that's specifically there for missing middle housing. So up to 120 or 150% of the area median income. That'll help developers add more housing stock. The second issue that I hear a lot about is energy prices. I think everybody's seen their electric bill go up, unfortunately, and there's a lot of demand on the grid. McLean County is a leader in solar and wind energy production, and I want to see McLean County continue to be a leader in solar and wind energy production and grow that. I'd rather have energy be clean, and I'd rather have energy be here in McLean County. There's a lot that goes into your electric bill, but the more energy we add into the grid in terms of supply will help lower costs. And then the third issue kind of encompasses those 2 issues, and everything else is cost. Everyone is really concerned about costs, from childcare to housing to their utility bills. So anything that the county can do to help reduce costs for families, whether it's through partnerships with other governments, advocacy at the state level, or programs that we can fund here locally.
Thank you for that. And so, if elected, are you in favor of raising, lowering, or maintaining the current tax rate, and why?
So for McLean County, I think we have to be cognizant of where property taxes are at. I think we should do everything we can to try to tighten our belts here locally with property taxes, but at a state and federal level, there clearly needs to be an increase on taxes for the wealthiest billionaires and millionaires in our country. They haven't paid their fair share since the 80s, and it's causing dramatic dramatic disinvestment in our communities and underinvestment in our communities, and that really puts a strap on local governments. So I would support action at the General Assembly, something like a millionaire surcharge tax. That way more funding can come to localities and we can reduce property tax burden while still maintaining and expanding services.
Okay, a great segue here is homelessness. Let's talk a little bit about that. How will you address homelessness and housing affordability? Talk about that, please.
So like I said before, affordable housing trust would be one of my main policy ideas. But when it comes to homelessness specifically, it's a very complex issue, but ultimately homelessness comes from a lack of affordable housing, right? So I'm really proud that the county provided funding to the Bridge Project with Home Sweet Home Ministries that added 50 units thereabout of housing for folks that were previously on the street. So anything type of project that we can provide capital or program funding to either maintain the bridge or do other projects similar to that to reduce the amount of folks that are street unhoused would be beneficial. Like I said, other expansions to tax credit programs at a federal or state level to allow for more missing middle housing and affordable housing to be developed would be a good start. And then with homelessness, I think also it's really important to continue to do street outreach. So places like Home Sweet Home Ministries, they do street outreach programs that help people that are unhoused, living on the street, get connected to resources and get connected to help. Because a lot of times when they don't know where to turn, so anything that we can do to get them information and get them the help they need, we should do.
Very good. How would you build trust between law enforcement and community members?
Well, I think it begins with engagement, right? I think law enforcement has a responsibility to be engaged in the community and be active in the community and seek the community's input. I'm a big fan of community policing and making sure that law enforcement, like I said, really reaches out and takes feedback from the community seriously. I think right now the McLean County Sheriff's Department does a good job, but there's always ways to be better, so I'd be interested in hearing proposals from the community about how to increase engagement and cooperation with law enforcement.
And the community members have mentioned that mental health components and services should be a part of that. What are your thoughts there? Yeah,
I think that's an important part. We have to think of law enforcement more broadly. Yes, there is the what most people would consider the traditional law enforcement that comes to mind, but there needs to be an expansion of that, whether it's mental health care services, whether it's folks going out with law enforcement to take care of folks who are experiencing a mental health crisis or anything like that. I also think de-escalation training, continuing that and expanding that for law enforcement officers helps in those situations as well.
Okay. Talking about engagement, how will you ensure that residents have a voice in decision making, and how will you personally communicate with your constituents?
Well, I mean, I think the duty of any elected official is really to be out in the community and engaging, right? You can't expect it to all be done through social media. You can't expect people to email you. You have to be out in the community and talking to people. So from my perspective, the more conversations you have, the better informed you are as an elected official about what your constituents desire and what they need. So that would be my primary strategy, but I maintain social media presence, try to make as many events as possible, and just have conversations, because I think, especially nowadays, there's a lot of things that are done digitally, but I think too many people have lost the art of conversation and just sitting down with somebody like this and just having a conversation.
Okay, and I think we have about another minute. Final question for you. What reforms would you support to increase government transparency?
Well, I think right now, for example, in our legislative priorities for McLean County, we're looking for reform to the Freedom of Information Act, because right now you have some companies and some digital media folks trying to take FOIA and use it as a profit tool for them, taking videos, and that really takes away a lot of staff time. And that's not really the intent of FOIA. The intent of FOIA is to allow citizens to be engaged in the government and request information. So I think that kind of reform to allow staff to have more time to respond to FOIA requests from people who are actually living in the community. But I also just think that government as in general should get offline a little bit and go into the community, whether it's having forums or just, again, having conversations with people, showing up to events, for whether it's staff or elected officials, and continuing a conversation with folks.
Okay, very good. Once again, on behalf of the NAACP, Bloomington-Normal branch, and Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Nu Psi Lambda chapter, we thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely, sir.